English made easy. Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
You know, sometimes the most powerful historical artifacts aren't made of stone or gold. They're actually made of words. Today, we're going to act like historical archivists and decode a few key words to unlock the incredible and ultimately tragic story of the Aztec Empire.
So our journey starts right here, in the middle of the non-stop hustle and bustle of Mexico City. It's a huge, modern metropolis, but the story we're chasing, well, it isn't in these skyscrapers. It's actually buried right beneath our feet.
Because, and this is the incredible part, this entire city was built directly on top of the ruins of Tenochtitlan, the magnificent capital of the Aztec Empire. So the question is, how does a city this amazing, literally built on a lake, just disappear?
Now, a lot of us think of the Aztecs as just warriors, right? But that's not the whole story. Their society was a place where arts and sciences really, truly flourished. I mean, their knowledge of astronomy, math, and engineering was, in many ways, way more advanced than what was happening in Europe at the exact same time.
To really understand their story, we have to look at the clues in the archives, the actual words that tell us who the Aztecs were before everything changed for them.
So, the Aztec story starts here, with this word. They were originally a nomadic people. They were hunters who, around the year 1300, finally settled on this kind of swampy island in the middle of a huge lake, Lake Texcoco.
And on that island, they became absolutely brilliant farmers. Their principal, or their most important crop, was corn. You know, this one single grain became the foundation for their entire civilization, and it allowed their population to just explode. As their empire got bigger and bigger, they developed a reputation. They became known as ruthless warriors. I mean, they showed absolutely no mercy in battle, conquering tribes all across central Mexico and demanding tribute from them.
But this ruthlessness wasn't just for power. It was deeply, deeply connected to their religion. Prisoners of war were often brought back to the capital city to be offered as a human sacrifice to their gods.
Okay, and this part is so crucial to understand. These sacrifices, they weren't just random acts of cruelty. For the Aztecs, it was a desperate attempt to placate their gods, to keep them happy, so they wouldn't, end the world again. Their whole worldview was built on keeping this fragile balance with their gods.
And it's that very belief system that set the stage for a tragic, world-ending misunderstanding when a group of strangers showed up from the sea in 1519.
And this is where it all started to go wrong. There was this ancient Aztec prophecy that talked about a light-skinned, bearded god named Quetzalcoatl who would one day return from the east. And then, this is what they saw landing on their shores.
You have to remember, horses were completely unknown in the Americas. So, for the Aztecs, seeing these men covered in metal, riding on top of these powerful, strange beasts, they were just utterly dumbfounded. To them, they looked like single, terrifying creatures.
All this confusion led the Aztec Emperor Montezuma to make a grievous error in judgment. I mean, a mistake with absolutely catastrophic consequences. He invited the strangers into his city as guests.
I mean, can you blame him? They believed these strange visitors were the gods from their own prophecy, returning just as they said they would. And if they were gods, then they must be invincible. They thought fighting them would be completely pointless. But the textbook story of this simple, easy conquest, that is not the whole story, not even close. If you look at the archives and even the land itself, you find a hidden history that's frankly way more fascinating.
See, the Aztecs weren't just warriors, they were master engineers. To feed a gigantic city built on a swamp, they created these incredible floating gardens called chinampas. These man-made islands kept all their crops from being inundated by floods, and they fed a huge population. An absolute engineering marvel.
And here's the thing. The conquest wasn't just won with guns and horses. The real secret weapon of the Spanish commander, Hernando Cortés, was translation. It was all about words.
A local woman, known as La Malinche, became Cortés's interpreter. And her role was absolutely principal. I mean, central to helping him understand and then exploit all the complex politics between the Aztecs and the other tribes they had already conquered. The events that would ensue, they were profoundly shaped by her ability to bridge these two worlds.
So once they were inside the city walls, it didn't take the Spanish very long to find what they were really looking for. They discovered a massive hoard of Aztec gold and silver hidden away in the palace.
And this discovery led directly to the infamous Night of Sorrows. The Aztecs finally realized these men weren't gods at all, and they revolted. The Spanish tried to escape the city under the cover of darkness, but they were so weighed down by the stolen gold they'd hoarded that hundreds of them drowned in the very same lake the city was built on.
But even though the Aztecs won that bloody battle, it was only a temporary victory. As the chaos began to subside, a new and much more brutal reality started to set in.
Cortez came back, and this time he brought more soldiers and even allies from rival tribes who hated the Aztecs. So, in 1521, after a brutal 80-day siege that basically starved the city, Tenochtitlan finally fell. The Aztec era was over.
The once great city was just ruins, and over the next few centuries, the waters of Lake Texcoco would recede, and a new Spanish colonial city would be built right on top of the old foundations, burying an entire civilization.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? A society that flourished for centuries, that built these engineering marvels and believed themselves to be invincible, vanished in just 2 years. It's a really stark reminder of how fragile even the greatest empires can be, and it makes you question what wealth and power truly mean when an entire era can disappear so completely.
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
For centuries, sailors on these long, lonely voyages would come back with the most incredible tales. Stories of seeing graceful figures on sun-warmed rocks way out in the distance, and they swore they were mermaids. It's this powerful, romantic image that's captured our imaginations for generations. But what if I told you the truth behind that myth is actually way more fascinating? Let's dive in and uncover the real story of the ocean's gentle giant. Turns out even Christopher Columbus got in on this. He actually recorded seeing these mermaids on his voyage back in 1493. But his field notes were, shall we say, a little less than enchanting. He basically wrote that they weren't quite the beauties from the stories, even noting they had a face that looked a bit like a man's. Kind of a reality check for the whole legend, wasn't it? So what on earth was he actually seeing out there? This is the source of the mermaid legend. Everybody, meet the manatee. It's a large, gentle, and very, very real marine mammal. And honestly, when you see one rise up from the water, maybe with some seaweed draped over its head like long hair, you can almost understand the mistake, right? Imagine being a tired sailor, miles from home, staring into the glare of the sun. You can see how it happened. Okay, so as we start to pull back that curtain of folklore, we get to meet the incredible creature that inspired it all. And let me tell you, the reality of the manatee is even more remarkable than any myth. The first thing you'll ever notice about a manatee is just its sheer presence. They are truly ponderous, which is just a great word that means heavy and slow-moving, but in the most majestic way. These are not small animals, not at all. They can grow up to 12 feet long and weigh as much as 3,000 pounds. And they move through the water with this slow, deliberate grace that is just absolutely mesmerizing to watch. And you might look at one and think, oh, it's a giant seal. But what's truly fascinating is that their biology tells a completely different and, honestly, a pretty surprising story. Okay, get this. Believe it or not, the manatee's closest living relative is the elephant. They are massive herbivores, just grazing on up to 200 pounds of aquatic plants every single day. Now, all that chewing wears down their teeth, so they've evolved this incredible system called marching molars, where new teeth are always growing in the back and pushing forward to replace the worn-out ones. And despite their huge size, they actually have very little body fat, which makes them incredibly sensitive to cold water. A condition called cold stress can actually be lethal for them. So here's the crucial point, the thing to really understand about them. Manatees are completely docile. They are gentle, they're curious, and they have no natural fear of us. They'll often approach swimmers and boats, not because they're aggressive, but just seemingly out of a love for company. It's this trusting, docile nature that makes them so endearing. But, as we're about to see, this beautiful quality is also what makes them so incredibly vulnerable in our world. And this peaceful, docile nature, well, it brings us right to the heart of the manatee's struggle. You see, their slow-moving world is on a direct collision course with our fast-paced one, especially on the water. Just picture this scenario. On one side, you have the ponderous manatee. It's anything but nimble. It just can't dart out of the way. And on the other, you have a speedboat, fast, powerful, and in this context,
Yeah, potentially lethal. It's just a tragic mismatch of speed and agility. And here's the really sad part. Because manatees often feed just below the surface, they're incredibly hard to spot. Many boaters just go blithely, or, carefree, on their way completely unaware that they've even hit one. It's often not malicious at all. It's a tragedy that's born from two worlds operating at fatally different speeds.
The consequences of these encounters are just devastating, and they tell a story that is literally carved into the bodies of these animals.
This number, it's just staggering. Wildlife experts in Florida estimate that 90% of adult manatees have been mutilated by boat propellers. 90%. Their backs are basically road maps of scars, a living testament to the constant danger they have to navigate every single day. This right here is the manatee's plight. Their incredibly difficult and dangerous situation. And it's not just about the boat strikes. Their plight is made even worse by habitat loss. Water pollution from runoff clouds the water, and it kills the very seagrass they need to survive. So they're being squeezed from all sides, facing starvation on one hand and these lethal collisions on the other.
So what can be done? Well, it requires dedicated human intervention. Authorities have to stay vigilant. That means constantly watchful for danger. They have to carefully monitor the population, tracking their numbers and their health, and strictly enforce protective regulations like no wake zones. Every single step is absolutely critical.
And now for some good news, because all is not lost, not at all. When we actually do take action, we see results. This isn't just a story of tragedy. It's also a story of a fragile but very hopeful comeback.
Not too long ago, the situation looked incredibly bleak. The manatee population just kept dwindling, its numbers shrinking year after year after year. They were on the very verge, the absolute brink of disappearing forever. But just look at this. Thanks to all that careful monitoring and protection, the population has rebounded to over 6,000 in Florida's waters alone. This chart right here shows what is possible when we decide a species is worth saving. It is a remarkable turnaround. This comeback was built on a foundation of legal protection. It didn't just happen by chance. As you can see on this timeline, key laws back in the early 70s, like the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act, gave them a real fighting chance. And this all culminated in 2016, when a huge milestone was reached. Their status was upgraded from endangered, which was a clear sign that these efforts were actually working. But the story isn't over. Not by a long shot. The threats are still there, and the debate continues. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If you were in charge, how would you explain the manatee's plight to boaters who claim that these regulations are just too strict and they hurt their livelihood? How do we balance our world with theirs? The survival of the real mermaid? Well, it depends on our answer.
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.